What was the problem that you were facing in the beginning of your business?
Once you find that one thing, don't feel like you need to sell 1 million people and 1 million people need to love your product. It could start at 100 people. And if they love it, why not grow? Why not expand? You have to do every aspect of your business. And then when you can find somebody that can do a certain aspect better than you can, you fire yourself. I didn't take retention very seriously. I thought, oh, I know how to send out emails. I've been doing it my whole life. And boy, was I wrong.
When you got retention fixed and dialed in, what was the outcome for your business in general?
Several real amazing benefits. One is we're no longer on the spam list. Number two, it's reduced our customer service needs. And number three is...
Dan, it is such a pleasure to have you on here. Just a very quick introduction to those who don't know Dan Castle. Dan is, first and foremost, a wonderful human being. Second, he is one of the most brilliant founders of one of Shopify's top 1% brands, which is CastleFlex. And very quickly, for those of you who don't know what Shopify is, it is the #1 platform in the world to start up your own e-commerce brand. And I have Dan Castle on today specifically to talk about a little bit about e-commerce in general, and specifically focus on the importance of retention marketing, because I feel like a lot of brand owners do not pay attention to retention enough. And who better to explain what retention and the power of it than Dan himself, who runs a challenger brand in CastleFlex. You can see it on the t-shirt over there. Dan is really challenging the health and fitness space, and his brand is, what it's done in 2 years is absolutely phenomenal, astronomical even. And yeah, Dan, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sam. And I just want to let everybody know that I'm by no means an expert in retention. 3 years ago, didn't even know what that word meant. So I don't want you to think, oh, okay, so here's like a technical expert and he's been living and breathing retention his whole life and he studied it in school. I had no idea what retention was. And just like most founders of startups, even though this startup is like my 7th startup, every year new things, new technologies come into play. And when you think you know something and you start to rest on your laurels, that's when you fall behind. So you're always when you're an entrepreneur nowadays, you can't just know about what you do. You have to sort of know about a lot of other areas of building the business, and you have to sort of become a self-appointed expert and hopefully have people like Sam call you an expert. 3 years ago, I didn't understand what the word retention meant. I think what I wanted to explain to everyone today is I looked at retention because I grew up in the 80s and 90s. To me, was Evite, MailChimp, just sending out a mass email to everybody on your list and hoping that it would result in sales or some sort of action on your brand or your website. That was what I knew. And so when I heard about Klaviyo, I said, oh, okay, so it's like a souped up Evite or MailChimp. And if you don't know what Evite or MailChimp is or are, that's just basically a software that you can, probably they're both still around today, where you can compile your entire email list of all your friends and family and potential customers and so on and so forth, and then send them emails and then see who opens those emails, who reads those emails, who clicks shop. And it was sort of exciting when it came out a while back. And I assumed that Klaviyo was just another version of that. So I didn't take retention very seriously. I thought, oh, I know how to send out emails. I've been doing it my whole life. And boy, was I wrong. And so when I started CastleFlex in November of 2022, I was doing Klaviyo myself, meaning if somebody goes onto your site and they click the welcome button and they get that 5% code or whatever it is that the brand is offering, they're exchanging their email for a discount. And in exchange, you get to email them until they opt out and hopefully get them to buy more of your products. That was as simple and as complicated as it was to me. That's what I thought Klaviyo was. And I was really, really wrong. And I don't work for Klaviyo. They are definitely, that's not my company. And I don't want anyone to think I'm plugging them. They're just the leader in the space right now. There's other companies that are trying to take market share from them, but they are pretty embedded in the startup world. So if you have a brand on Shopify, there's a very good chance you're using Klaviyo. And I guess the best way to describe it is we had about, let's say, 5,000 emails after the first couple of months. We were really excited about it. I would send out an email every once in a while. I'd get back like $200 in sales every time I'd send out an email. And I just felt like something really wasn't working because that's pretty much what you're paying per month for the service. So something was a little off about it. I hired a retention company and they took me from like 8% to 16%, meaning if you're getting $100,000 of revenue from your business, then let's say $8,000 or $12,000 or whatever, or $16,000, somewhere in that range is what you're getting from the emails that are signing up on your site.
From your understanding now, right? What does retention actually mean? So maybe someone sat here and they're like, okay, like what's retention? Because for a little bit of context, I was actually speaking to another founder the other day, and to them, retention literally meant how many returning customers come to the business, right? So from where you stand now, just for someone watching, what exactly is retention according to you?
So, what it used to be to me was how you can keep your existing customers involved in the brand. That's what I thought retention was. That's not what it is today. Today, Klaviyo has built such a complex system, its own e-com system of existing customers, potential customers, repeat customers, and then being able to segment them into different categories so that you can target those categories accordingly, while also getting an idea of what the interaction is between people that are coming to your website and actually having an intention to buy or learn more, right? Because they say you need 5 or 6 times to see something before you pull the trigger on it. So technically, after your fifth or sixth text or email, there should be a purchase there if they're still like on your list and they haven't opted out. So originally, I thought retention was just retaining existing customers. That's what I thought it was. And I was very wrong about that.
Not only is it about retaining your customers, the modality of retention is usually email, SMS, and direct mail, which traditionally I think a lot of e-commerce brand owners they kind of miss out because they just don't see it as important, right? They're very focused on advertising and acquiring new customers, but then they unlock this world of retention and realize how that really supports their business. And we're going to get into all of that. But before we get into the powerful effects that you've seen yourself in Castleflex with retention, right? We're going to jump into all that. What was the problem that you were facing in the beginning of your business? Because I want somebody who's watching this, who's maybe starting their e-commerce journey, or maybe who's even like a few steps into their e-commerce journey, or even flourishing, right? To understand how you become a top 1% brand on Shopify. So talk to me about the problem from a lens of retention, right? You weren't using retention very well to begin with. And what was really the problem there? Like, what were you facing as a brand owner? What were the struggles that someone can relate to?
So the number one is what you even got with the old services like MailChimp and Evite, which is people opting out and reporting spam and just not being, they sign up and then they're sort of annoyed at how many emails that they're getting, and they feel like they're getting pushed into buying something all the time. They get fed up and they'll either opt out or they'll report spam and opt out, which is a bad scenario for you, because what ends up happening is you say, oh, no big deal, I'm just losing a couple of emailers. That's not true. You actually end up getting put on the spam list by Google or whoever else is, whatever service you're using. And so basically what happens is the customers that are interested start not getting your emails because you've been put on this spam list, because if you have a certain amount of people, like a percentage of people on that email list that are opting out, it's going to trigger some AI at Gmail that's going to put you on anything from info@castleflex.com is spam. And so all of a sudden people that wanted your email don't get it anymore. That's just one problem, but that's a big problem because those are the people that actually want to stay on, and now they're all of a sudden it's going to their spam. So that was one issue. Another issue is the main one, which is CAC, consumer acquisition cost. So how much does it cost to acquire a customer? And when you watch investor pitches, you sort of see how much money it costs nowadays post iOS 14 to acquire a customer and then retain them. So let's say I'm selling a device for $200 and it costs me $100 to acquire that customer. I've just lost $100 right off the bat. That doesn't include all the fees of building that content and doing those photo shoots and paying those models and influencers and whoever it is that you're doing what you're doing there. And so when you have a brand, you want to be as profitable as possible, or you can't stay in business. So if you have a high CAC, and you have you're on a spam list, meaning Gmail has put you on spam, no one's liking your emails. It becomes sort of an uphill battle post purchase, meaning that when somebody orders your device, how do you keep them engaged, let them know about new products, new colors, new things that are happening, new memberships and subscriptions that you're offering, all the things that really take your business to the next level. You don't have those options as much as you did before. So it's a big deal.
So the problem you're facing initially was it was going like your emails were going to spam. So basically, you found it difficult to connect to your customer and actually have a conversation with them because the way that you'd initially set up your retention was let's say wrong, right? And another problem was your customer acquisition cost was going a lot higher because you weren't able to capture that revenue through email on the back end. And what would you say, Dan, to a brand owner who might be facing a similar thing where, I speak to brand owners here all the time, and the biggest complaint that they have is they kind of get stuck at a certain level because acquisition cost is higher. So how did you crack that equation from a lens of retention? Yeah, so what would you say, let's say, to a brand owner who's facing a similar struggle?
So this applies to every problem that you're having as a entrepreneur. Like I said in the beginning, even if you're an expert at what you do, meaning like no one knows your brand or how to sell it better than you do, that's not enough nowadays. You have to understand how the other aspects of the business that support your brand work. So ask for help. That's the number one suggestion, is ask an agency that you're working with that you respect, or somebody in business, or a mentor. Ask them to find someone, get proof of concept, get referrals, get recommendations. Make sure that that person that you're bringing in, or that company that you're bringing in, even if it's just on a project basis, is legit. Don't just go on to one of those, Upwork type sites and hire somebody that has 5-star reviews. You've no idea how they got those 5 stars. It could have been 100 family friends. You have no idea. So just ask around, do the research, and go try to work out deals that aren't long term. Meaning, it doesn't have to be month to month, but if you're not going to see an enormous drastic improvement in 3 months, then it's probably not the right fit. The best companies, it's like day one. You can feel it before it even happens, and you're sort of like, I know that's going to work, because you just see the way they prepare and how forthright they are with their process. Meaning, I've had companies I've worked with where you've no idea when they're going into it what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. You think, oh, I don't want to bother them. Like, maybe that's their secret, that's their trade secret. That's just not how it works. The best companies are so transparent because they're so good at what they do. They're not worried about giving you information on how they're going to do it. And they'll give you 2 or 3 companies that they've done it for with screenshots, with their phone numbers and emails that you can call to say, are they legit? Do you think I'd be a good fit here? You'd be so surprised. Sometimes those referral calls, you become really close with those entrepreneurs because they're going through the same thing that you're going through. They've just gone through a little bit earlier on that particular subject, but you are maybe ahead of them in 3 or 4 other areas of the business, and they need that help from you. So I actually love the process of checking out whether or not somebody's legit by speaking to other entrepreneurs. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love getting their phone numbers and their emails and being like, this is who I am. We're a small up and coming company, and this is everything to me. This is an important decision. I can't keep going through people or agencies or companies for retention or any area of the business. Please help me make the right decision. And no entrepreneur wants to see another entrepreneur fail. If they do, then they're just not a proper. I don't know. Entrepreneurs are really supportive, and it's a community, and we all sort of know what we're dealing with, and we're all going through very similar things, working on Saturday nights or skipping something on a Sunday just because there's something going on with the business. You have to be available for it. Only entrepreneurs really understand that. It's not like a corporate job, which I've had corporate jobs where you can turn off the second you get home and you don't have to turn on until you show up. That's not the entrepreneur life. The entrepreneur life is 24/7. You're dreaming about it, you're thinking about it, you're waking up with it. And so when you have an opportunity to speak to another entrepreneur who's willing to help, do it.
100%. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dan. And 100%. I think it's in the DNA of an entrepreneur to want to see a fellow entrepreneur win and, help them on their journey.
Yeah.
So then if we take it back to retention, right, as well, just something on my mind. Initially, you were struggling to get retention right. So on your climb to being a 1%, top 1% Shopify brand, how is that hampering you? So how is that like, was it holding you back? Did you not even realize it was holding you back? Was it something that was, because again, the context is speaking to many, many brand owners, sometimes it feels like they don't give retention the fair shake that it deserves. And sometimes it's purely because of the fact that they're oblivious to what they're missing out on when it comes to actually focusing on retention. So, from a very candid perspective on your climb to where you are now, why was it actually an issue that this retention system, wasn't working for you?
Yeah, so first of all, if you're not taking retention seriously, then you're not going to be successful. That just is a red flag for me. That tells me that there's maybe other things that you're also not going to take seriously because you don't take the time to learn about it, or you don't want to understand something new, or you don't want to admit that you don't know something. So you have to take retention seriously. I was a little slow to the retention game because my business was actually doing so well that even though the retention it wasn't a huge deal, but I didn't know what I was missing out on, and I had heard what the stats were on retention just in general. I knew that retention is a very important part of the business, and you should be doing approximately, I don't know, 20 to 30% of your revenue from your retention or your texts and emails. So again, for every $100,000 that you're bringing in, 20,000 to 30,000 should be coming. You should see that when you go to your Klaviyo dashboard or your retention dashboard, whatever company you use. You should see that it says, 20% or 25% of revenue is coming from our platform, meaning the customers that you've signed up for or the customers that you're texting on a regular basis. That's a very important number. And so 30% of a brand that's doing $1 million a month, that's 300 grand. If you're not doing that, maybe that's the difference between a company that stays in business and a company that doesn't make it. And it's tough to watch when you see a great company or a great entrepreneur not make it, and you're excited about them. I've met a bunch that I'm like, oh my god, I really hope this one works. This is a great idea. This is a great product. And then when you go on to buy the other day, I went on to buy, and they were gone. They were gone off Amazon. Their site was closed. It's so sad because you've had so many conversations with that entrepreneur, and you sort of just wish that entrepreneur had maybe asked you for help. Maybe they didn't ask you for help. They were just, one of them we had spoken to said, "You're not big enough yet for us to do a collab with. Catsflex is an up and coming company. We're a little bit further ahead of you. You don't have as many emails or text permissions as we have from our list. We have 35,000. You only have 10,000. So let us know when you catch up." And now they're out of business. So that's a shame. And at the end of the day, don't get fooled by what somebody looks like on social media or how many emails that they have or text messages that they're able to send every week. Don't that's those are metrics that are a part of a bigger puzzle. Look at their mentality. Do they have the right mentality? So like anyone that's listening to this podcast right now, because we're not a name brand podcast. So but if they've seeked us out and they've found us, then they're probably in the right mindset because they're trying to learn and understand how to not make the mistakes that so many other entrepreneurs make.
100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's something about seeking out knowledge that you can't replace, especially in the long term, right? And when you do seek, you end up finding eventually. So Dan, I have a question for you here, right? If you could boil down in 5 sentences what it took you to get from A to B, because obviously getting to a top 1% Shopify is like a little bit down the line, right? What were the 5 key things that you really did? Those 5 like milestone things, just off the top of your head, that you did to get Castleflex into orbit, right? What were those things?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of it is actually before you even start the company. Let's just say that there's a problem and you have that problem. For me, it was herniated discs, and for my wife, it was sciatica and sporadic plantar fasciitis, which over 30% of the population deals with, over 50% if you're over the age of 50 and you're active. So this is something that hits a lot of people, but you're not finding the solutions that are out there. And there's so many solutions, and you sort of feel let down because some of them might be helpful, but they're very expensive and they're short term. Let's say like a cortisone shot, for example. It's a 5-foot needle, and they stick it in your whatever area they want to stick it into, and it's like a couple $100. Sometimes insurance, most of the time insurance won't cover it. And then you're feeling great for like 3 or 4 days after you get that injection, not during injection. And then you're like, wait a second, I'm back to where I just started. What is going on? I just spent 2 hours getting these appointments and sitting there and getting this injection and paying this money, and now I'm back to square one. It gets debilitating as a family man, as a businessman. You don't have the time to waste on situations like that. You're always moving on to the next. So you find something that everybody is dealing with, or a large group of people are dealing with, or even a very specific group of people are dealing with. It doesn't always have to be the largest market size, and sometimes the best businesses are niche markets. And then you say, okay, I'm going to fix it, and you fix it, and then you want to bottle that, right? You want to bottle that solution. Now, the first thing that you want to do is say, does this solution exist out there already? That's number one. It's so painful, but when you go on Google or the search, or any of these search sites, and you see the exact solution to your problem, and then you try that, and then it works, you just got to let it go. So someone has figured it out. They've got it. I'm going to say move on, deal with something, find another solution to another problem that you think people would appreciate. What I did with CastleFlex was I found a solution that worked, and I patented it. And I didn't patent it and then go running around saying, I've got patents issued like you see on the TV shows for entrepreneurs. Like, having a pending patent is not the same as having an issued patent. What I mean is, don't brag about having a pending patent. Get a patent issued by the USPTO or by the authority in your country. Once it's issued, then launch it, or time it so that the patent will sort of come in around the same time that people are starting to learn about your brand. There's there's no rush. You don't want to put something out there too early, then someone takes it. You don't have the certification yet that you need to protect you for that business. I'm just a very staunch supporter of patents. That's just how I am. I'm not smart enough or wealthy enough to compete with all the other big companies that are out there, like the Theragons of the world and the Pelotons. I don't have those resources. My wife and I were starting this company with our own money. We were not doing a raise, and we need to make sure that we were going to be protected if this idea worked. If it worked for us, it worked for family members, it worked for friends, and the economics work, meaning you get a business that you have a business that's profitable, that's unique, and that there's a market for it. You don't need five things. You just need that one thing. And so once you find that one thing, then everything else is just like search and discover, R&D, finding the right partners, finding the right team, and making sure that you get the best of the best, that you build your own A team around you. And I don't have any full-time employees, but you need to have teams that are incentivized to be successful. And once you have those teams, then the sky's the limit, mixed with a great product that's unique.
Fantastic. Appreciate you sharing that, Dan. And that brings me on. I actually want to extrapolate some of the things that you said as well. So I think there's about, like, I would bucket it into three different categories of entrepreneur, right? You have somebody going from 0 to a million, right? And then after that, you have someone going from about, let's say, 100K to 200K. So what would that be? Like 1 to 3 million, and then 3 million and beyond, right? So what I'd want to know from you is, what is one central piece of advice that you give to people in all three in these three categories? So if we start, let's say somebody is watching the show and they are between 0 and 1 million, right? As a top 1% Shopify owner, what is that one visceral, direct piece of advice that you would give them that they need to be focusing on to get from 0 to a million? What is that piece of advice from you?
I call it the 80-20 world. I need 80-20 rule. So this is going to sound a little strange, but what I've learned in my research, trying to understand why certain people are successful or why certain brands are successful and others are not, is the 80-20 rule. And what that means is 80% of the decisions that you are making and the way you are conducting your business are rational, pragmatic, make financial sense, meaning your accountant would be proud of all of the decisions that you're making. If let's say you spend $100 on ads and you're getting back $250 in revenue, that's you could say, oh, you spent thousands of dollars in marketing this week. Yeah, but I already have a formula and it's working. So what I'm saying is 80% is one, is 100% rational and pragmatic, but then there needs to be a 20%. And the 20% is the why the hell would that person try that? Or why would that entrepreneur or business owner think that that was going to work? That is really risky. Why would an entrepreneur do that? So I think with the 80/20 rule, it's anytime I see somebody that's really successful, I'm always like they're 20% crazy. And you see it in their life and you see it in how they conduct business. And so I'm 100% rational and pragmatic. And so I had to manufacture the 20%. So I literally had to create like a crazy 20% in my decision making to say like, okay, that's going to be a little bit risky. Even my wife is not going to get behind that idea. That's when I know I'm in my 20%. And even if it doesn't work, I have no regrets. But my guide is 80% rational pragmatic decisions that make financial sense and follow the data, and 20% make no sense, super creative, super outside the box, that type of thing. So for me, that's the rule, 80/20.
Okay, brilliant. So for somebody 0 to 1 million, they should focus on making the best product possible because that will
Yeah.
naturally have visceral growth and it will be easier to market. There'll be word of mouth. Something, you've seen at Castleflex yourself is your product is so good that as soon as someone buys it, they will naturally advocate for it. So it kind of has its own growth curve after someone actually purchases it because they're very likely to recommend it to a friend. They're very likely to recommend it to a loved one. So 0 to 1 mil, focus on a good product, right? So now what about once you've hit 1 mil, let's say, you're at what, 80, 100K a month. How do we get to 3 mil? What is that, just that initial level of scale look like? And what is the main
So
focus for someone in there to get into the next, cross the chasm and get into the next level of the game?
I'm a hardware person. So that means I sell things that you can like touch and feel and that you are going to own in your possession. This is one of my favorite. This is going to answer your next question. This is one of my favorite reminders. I keep this on my desk. This is a kerosene iron. It was designed in the 1930s. It's patented, made in the USA, has a wooden handle. It's really heavy. Sound familiar? Like that's my business model. That's what I do with Castleflex. So you see behind me. This has been around for 100 years, and I can still use it to today. Like it came with the little oil canister and everything. So when you go from 1 million to 2 million or 1 million to 3 million, having a good product now turns into having good QC, and that what that means is you're now making more of something, and now that makes it harder on your manufacturer or your production team, and now they've got to make more of it faster, and that's where the quality control, the QC, can be sacrificed, and that cannot be sacrificed. So one of the things that I always do is 10-20% of all products that we ship actually come through my garage, my personal garage at my house where I'm at right now, and I inspect it and ship it myself, because if there's a problem, I'm going to see it. They don't know which 20% I'm getting. I'll pull it from the warehouses, and I'll be shipping them to customers with notes. By the way, it's the founder, Dan Castle. I hope you enjoy this. If you need anything, let me know. So often there'll be or a gift inside, like a surprise gift, like a branded pen or something. But it will usually give me some sort of feedback that is worth a lot to me, and an appreciation.
That's gold right
Yeah.
there. See, I think I found that watching this, like that 20% that you do in QA that comes directly to you, you try to give your customers, and I didn't know this either. So you try to give your customers a personalized experience. I didn't know that some products had a pen or a personalized note in it. And so why do you do that?
I grew up in the 80s, and I loved my cereal with, I would get like my Lucky Charms or whatever it was that my parents were getting for me at the supermarket. And I always wanted to be the first one to open up the cereal package because I wanted the toy. And I loved the surprise factor, but it always usually it said it on the box like you're going to get a surprise. What we do is a little different. Like you don't know if you're going to get it or not. You don't know if you're going to get a letter from the founder or a gift from another company that we're collabing with, or something that we just invested in, like a cool sticker or a cool pen or whatever it is. And we just want there to always be that element of surprise, pleasant surprise, right? So we're often surprised in not so great ways in life. So I want every experience around Castleflex to be something that's pleasurable and creative and something they didn't expect. And so that's to me just something that I like to do, but it's my way of doing quality control and knowing, wait a second, I know that that's not an issue with my device. I ship hundreds of them a week, and I've never seen that issue, and no one's complaining about that issue. So what happened? Oh, okay, you're using it wrong. You didn't follow the instructional videos. Like, our device is not a toy. You have to know how to use our device. So it's not like a tennis racket where you can just hit the ball. Some are good, some are bad. Like, you have to use our device the right way for it to work. And I sort of know the device will tell me if you're using it right. I can tell where your fingers are positioned on the handles, and I can tell if you're pulling too hard by pain you might feel in your Achilles, which it shouldn't be on, it should be on your heel bone, this heel strap. So the device and the combined with the feedback I'm getting from the customer allows me to understand what the issue is way before they even understand what the issue is. And it makes me feel confident that, oh, it's not a production issue, it's a customer issue. We just need them to learn the right way to use this. Once we teach them, and okay, now we got to teach them. How do we teach them? Free videos on YouTube? Wait a second, we're missing a subscriber income revenue stream. That's really important. That lowers our CAC. So let's start CastleFit, which now you can take our classes and watch flows and get guided instructionals in HD with professionals that are physical therapists and doctors, and even yours truly. So that's a good example of how you can turn something that could be a potential issue into a great opportunity for the brand.
Brilliant. So to get from 1 to 3 million, it's essentially get your QA process absolutely dialed in and try to find some form of subscription model within your business that someone could get on a recurring basis. Would you say that's the key from 1 to 3 million?
Yeah, it's like, really, let's simplify it. If you have 100 people on your driveway, and they each gave you $100 for whatever product that you're selling, and 99 or 95 of them never come back, meaning to complain, not necessarily come back to buy again, but just they don't complain. They go off on their lives, their busy lives, hopefully using your product. You don't hear from them, and only one or two or three or four people say, I need a size up, or this is a little bit heavier than I thought, or this device isn't really doing it for me, or I'm just too lazy, I'm not going to get use out of it. Whatever it is, if you have that one scenario where you have a 95% satisfaction rate for 100 people, then why can't that be a million people? And then why can't that be 10 million people? What's the difference between those random 100 people? Not meaning you're not pulling them all from your friends and family. They're just 100 random people that live in your state that happen to buy your product. Think of it like that. And so the way that I test my devices, because we come out with new inventions every year, is slowly, carefully, right? 80/20. So 80 makes perfect sense. 20, oh my God, I can't believe they're launching that device. No one's ever done that before. That's the 20 for our next device. That is going to make all the difference when you are confident that the device or the product that you're selling is actually not going to be coming back to you. You're not going to have to figure out what to do with it when it's returned and it's not returned in the same condition that you sold it. If you can just replicate that as you grow the business, every few months or every few quarters, whatever it is, then you've got a winning recipe there. And obviously you have to be fiscally responsible, but that to me is the key. Don't feel like you need to sell a million people and a million people need to love your product. It could start at 100 people. And if they love it, why not grow? Why not expand?
I love it. No, that's absolutely fantastic. So, what about somebody from 3 million and beyond? So now, we've crossed that chasm, we've got, good product market fit. How do we grow beyond that? What is the focus at that point?
Now the problems start to change. Let's say QC never goes away. So you're always still making sure that you've got the quality control, right? If you have a patented device like Hasselflex, you want to make sure that as you're growing into more countries that you're getting those patents for those specific countries. So your costs start to go up, and your costs are going up, and your QC is getting a little bit more intense. And so before you know it, you have a strain on cash because you have to buy more inventory. And then that's where the loan sharks come in. And it starts with Shopify Capital. They'll be the first one to, it'll show up on your screen. I'll lend you 100 grand for 25% interest rate, paying back 17% a day of your daily sales. It gets scary because you have a lot of money that you need to actually reinvest into the brand, and you're a little concerned because you don't have a lot of you can't there's not a lot of opportunity to take risks anymore because the factory's asking you for money, and it's costing more for whatever reason to run your business. As you get bigger, there's a lot more costs that come in, that get it could be legal costs. There's a lot of things that are good with scale, but there's a lot of things that aren't. So you need to start to find ways to balance the expenses. That's the key. And to pay for the inventory in a way that doesn't hurt your cash flow too much. So that's where you start to look at taking a loan, or taking some capital, or maybe reinvesting in your business personally, or getting an investor out from the outside. But this is where things can get really tricky, because when you need to pay your factory, and they're like, listen, we're not going to produce any more products until you pay us. That's where people will panic, and they'll take that deal on Shopify Capital or with any other loan company, and they'll make a mistake because it'll take all their profits. And what they think is, oh, this is going to open up the floodgates for me. Actually, in most cases, I believe it doesn't. I believe it actually constricts you, and it just, your days are numbered. So that's where the real game begins, is when you get to the 3 million.
Interesting. So, if there was a direct piece of advice that you could give to someone who's just hit the 3 million mark with their Shopify brand, what would that direct piece of advice be?
I always say, imagine you have a magic wand, and you could say, I can wave this magic wand and I will get what I want. And I don't want to pay 20% interest or 15% interest. I want to pay 6% interest. And that would work for me. That would allow me to borrow money, but also pay my vendors, and also take a small profit and continue to grow this brand. And don't settle until you get it, or get something really close to it. And the way to do that is to speak to everyone. Again, you're going back to that entrepreneur, the thing that makes you an entrepreneur in the first place. You're sucking up, yeah, you're sucking up you got to be really you have, there's a lot of humility here, because you got to go to people that you might not have thought you'd ever go to, and say, listen, I just don't know how to figure this out. I owe X amount of money. This company is offering me right on my screen. Should I take it? No, no, no. You got to speak to this company and that company. And here's 3 or 4 companies. Let them bid. And you'd be surprised. All these companies, it's like living back in the 80s. They're all fighting with each other to get your business. And it's the best feeling. And here's what you need to remember. Most people are not in your position. They're not in the position where they can pick and choose. If you're at the 3 million range, you're now in a position where you have to start taking advantage of the advantage of being in business at 3 million. So when they make those offers, say, no, that doesn't work for me. I've got 3 other companies working on it, but this is what I'm looking for. If you can hit that or get really close to it, I'll stop working with those companies right now and sign a deal with you today, and you can get that money. That's the way that I would look at it. I think a lot of people, they don't want to deal with it. So they just do the first deal that they get, or the second deal that they get. You have to look at 6, 7, 8, 9 deals before you figure it out. Because guess what? That's the same company, hopefully, that you'll be working with for many, many years, and you'll build a relationship with them, and they will give you even better deals, even while you're in the first deal. They see you're paying it back on time, and that you're a good company and you're growing, then all of a sudden they're not going to want to let some other company come in and take their business. So take advantage. Once you're at 3 million, now you have a little bit of power. And by the way, go back to your factory and say, the prices you gave me a year ago or 2 years ago, those prices don't work for me anymore. My volume is now 5 times, 6 times, right? Because that's what it's going to be if you go from 0 to 3 million. And I want a better deal, and try to get a few percentage points shaved off of your first cost. And that will then help you balance some of the added costs of getting to 3 million. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So negotiate with, with your factory. And Dan, do you think you have to raise at this level to get to the next level? Do you have to get a loan? Do you have to get some form of injection? Or what about a brand owner who sat there thinking, I don't want to get a loan at 3 million. I want to bootstrap this all the way to, whenever I want to exit. Like, so what's the modality over there? Do you have to do that?
No, you do not have to do that. And that is such an important question. And that could be an entirely different episode. But if you can build, when I hear of entrepreneurs, or I see it on LinkedIn all the time, I just raised X million dollars at a $30 million valuation. And like everyone's like so excited for that person. Oh my God, you got $1 million and this and that. To me, I look at that as I just gave up 25% of my company that I've worked my whole life to build. And that money is probably really cheap to the company that you're talking to. They probably have 20 other investments and only one has to hit or two has to hit. And it doesn't mean as much to them as it means to you. But then when you start to do well, they all of a sudden start showing up at your door saying, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. Remember, we signed this agreement and you agreed to X, Y, and Z. And like you'd be surprised. They don't put their money in just and then like your father or mother does and say, good luck. It comes with conditions. And especially the more money that you ask for, the more conditions they have. So I've done Castleflex without any outside investors. I have one investor that's a veteran and my mentor, and I didn't need him to invest at all, and he did not need to invest either. He's fine. He's on 4 publicly traded companies boards, and he doesn't need this. But he's somebody that I love to speak to every day, and I love just the back and forth with him about the business. And sometimes he agrees with me, and sometimes he doesn't. But I need to have that sounding board and somebody that's going to say, no, Dan, that doesn't make sense. I know you're the boss, but that doesn't make sense. I've done this a lot for a lot more years than you have. I have a lot more experience in this area. Don't do it. And and that's what I needed. So I was willing to allow him to come in. And also in many ways, I thought I was getting back to him for all of the time he's invested in me and helping me. But it's not free. I didn't gift it to him. He had to buy in at a valuation, because you need to have in writing what your company is valued at if you ever do decide to do a valuation and you do decide to do a raise, which isn't out of the question. It's not something I want to do, but it's something I might have to do at some point. If it's the difference between getting to $1 billion company evaluation or staying where I am now, I would do it. I think I can keep going for now with not having to do it, but don't be fooled by all those people that are bragging about raising money. That's silly to me. If you can do it without raising money, that's great. By the way, if you are going to raise money, number one, it should be an active investor, an investor that's strategic, that can say, listen, I'm an amazing person at finance, and I will make sure to help you as much as I can in going through your cash flow analysis and your balance sheets and your P&L and all the things that you can do, but you can't do it as well as I can. I've seen thousands of companies, and I really need to give you some perspective on this. That's a very strategic investor. Or somebody that's an inventor, like let's say Elon Musk wanted to invest in Castleflex. That's interesting to me, not because he has a lot of money, because the amount of money I would need would not be somebody as rich as Elon Musk, but I know he knows what it's like to invent amazing products and create new categories that didn't exist before, and that's what we're doing in our area. He's not in our area, so that would be a beneficial relationship, because a mutually beneficial relationship, because he is not in my world and I'm not in his world, but I think there's a lot that we could share with each other. Of course, Elon Musk is not even going to return my call, but I'm just giving you an example of how it would work, and how I look at investors.
No, brilliant. Appreciate that. And before we move on to the next thing, Dan, one question I have, right? So I'm just thinking from a perspective of, let's say I'm a brand owner watching this, and before you hit the 3 million mark, you mentioned focus on product, right? Focus on product, focus on innovation, focus on making sure your thing's great. So what about the brand owner who's kind of sat there and be like, okay, then that's great. I've got a good product and stuff, but I'm struggling to get growth. I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, right, in the e-commerce space, it is tough. iOS 14, prices are going high, all that stuff. So on a growth side, what would you advise those people? Like, let's say they're like, okay, well, I'm focusing on products, I've got all my product dialed in, but where I'm struggling with is actually growing. So what would you tell that category of person?
So the first thing I always say is you have to understand what happened when iOS 14 was implemented. This was the first time that Apple basically put their foot down and said, the people want privacy. That's going to be part of our brand, is offering people privacy. It's really not. It's I don't want to say it's a hoax, but it's like a false sense of privacy. Let's be real. But what it basically meant was the tracking and the way to get to customers became much more difficult. So, and that became much more expensive. So if you were pre iOS 14, they say those were the good old days, like the Wild West, where you could have like a crazy day of $20,000 in sales. If you were, instead of doing 5,000 a day for a company, you could be doing 25 on a Sunday. Whereas now everything's very regimented. You almost sort of know what you're going to do every day. I sort of think that they're capping you based on how much money you're spending. It's strange that there's a feeling that I get that they're capping you. So if I'm spending a $5,000 a day on ads, that I'm only going to get anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 in sales. That's not what it was pre iOS 14. It was you could spend 5,000 and you could do 50,000. So we're a post iOS 14 brand, so we don't have a lot of the benefits of what it. And by the way, I'm glad that I didn't. It's like skiing in America. We say it's like don't ski in Colorado if you're growing up in Vermont, because in Vermont you think the skiing is the best, and then when the second you go to Colorado, you never want to go back to Vermont again. It's the difference between skiing and floating, and so it's the same thing with iOS 14. Like I don't feel bad that I wasn't there before, because I would have only gotten maybe a year or two of it, and then I would have been depressed every day after. So we're just a post iOS 14 company. We don't know what it was like before. We've only heard the stories. And so, yeah, I mean, I did have a DTC company in 2002, which was during the wild days. And that did happen where you would just like get back from dinner and you would see like enormous amounts of sales and you didn't even do anything. Anyway, those days are over. You have to work for what you need. So consumer acquisition costs are going up. You're having to spend a lot more money on inventory. So your cash flow gets tighter. And then that's where retention comes in. So and I did it in steps. I didn't invest in retention until I got to 3 million, because I never would have been able to afford a good retention company anyway in the beginning. So I wanted to learn it myself. Like I started in the warehouse. My parents have an apparel company. They started it in 1981. They're still running it today. They're very successful. I've never had the opportunity to be in their corner office. I started in their warehouse. I never made it past their sales department before I quit. So I just wanted to, I'm an entrepreneur like my parents. I couldn't just sit at a desk. So I needed to start my own. They're in private label. I like brands. Branding is my thing. So I went there and I said, listen, I'm just going to look at this the way I did at the warehouse. I'm just going to try to learn the ins and outs from the very beginning. And that way, when I eventually can afford a great retention company, I'll be able to have the conversation with them and understand why they're so good at what they do and how they can help me. I can't go in knowing nothing. It's just not, there are people that can do that. I can't do that. I need to know what someone's talking about before I make a decision. And so retention is one of the ways to do that. And it's probably the most important way in today's post iOS 14 world.
Interesting. So retention is how you really unlock that scale. And we're going to cover a little bit more on retention, but you raised a really interesting point. And this is what I wanted to ask you as well. So if I'm a brand owner here and I'm sat and I'm wondering, like, what does that hiring roadmap look like? I have 1,000 emails in my inbox from every agency in the world. I have 1,000 freelancers, right? So again, what is that hiring road? Like, when do you advise someone to get an agency, let's say for ads? Let's cover all of it, right? Because I'm sure a founder at every stage is kind of wondering, like, damn, what is the roadmap? What is the blueprint here? When is too early? When is too late? Half of them have had bad experiences with some kind of agency or the other. I mean, I get on calls all the time where someone's had some form or another negative experience that kind of bleeds then onto us and puts us in the same light, right? Even though we try everything to keep ourselves far away from that kind of category or that bucket. So for the brand owner watching, wondering, damn, like, what is that roadmap? What would you say to them? How do you go about hiring? Because one thing to note before you do answer that, One thing I admire so much about you, Dan, is how you've kept such a lean team. I hope I'm allowed to say this, but your margins are absolutely incredible in your business. You work with a few core partners that just absolutely have helped you, scale. Obviously, you focus on product, so the partners that you work with are able to scale you because you have a good product, which is part of the advice you gave as well prior. But for the brand owner watching, what does that roadmap look like?
So I have a really simple philosophy on this, and that is you have to do every aspect of your business. And then when you can find somebody that can do a certain aspect better than you can, you fire yourself. So my goal 3 years ago was to learn every aspect of the business. Okay, this goes across everything from social media to marketing to content to the PR end of it to the quality control to the patenting of the inventions to the manufacturing to the distribution to the expansion, and the list goes on and on. And then once you've learned all the different aspects of the business, then start firing yourself from certain aspects so that every single few months or every single few years, you have less and less responsibilities and it's taken over by true experts in the field that you understand what they're doing, you know what they're giving you and what they're getting in return. And that's the way that I address it. So I did retention, and then I fired myself and hired another company to do it. And then they did an okay job, but I heard it was still half of what the retention metric should be. You should have approximately 30% of your revenue coming through retention, meaning your emails and text messages should be about 30% of the revenue that you bring in. And once I found that, okay, they were able to double the return on investment on retention, but it's still half of what it should be. Also, I think a big factor here. We have three little girls under the age of 10 in my home. So when I started the company, everybody was under the age of 7. If you think that you can just work all day and it's not going to affect your personal life, you're wrong. So you want to fire yourself from as many positions as possible. You want to spend time with your kids. You want to adopt crazy kittens and walk the dog every day. And you want to do things that give you a little bit of a release and remind you that like, the world is more than just your business. And you have a lot of people that they don't care how successful you are. They just want to be with you. So every time I fire myself from a position, it's like I take my family out for dinner. We go to this Italian restaurant that's like 10 minutes away that we can never get reservations at. And I will say, guys, we're celebrating because I just fired myself from social media today, or I just fired myself from retention today. That's what I mean.
One thing I understand is you're very growth minded. You'll learn something yourself, but then you're very open to firing yourself from it. You don't have like kind of like a compulsive thing to control. And my own experience working with you, you're very laissez-faire. You let somebody else show you their worth. As long as they show you that they're capable, you get out of their way and you just try to support them. And honestly, especially specifically from someone who's working in a service, business, it is a pleasure to work with someone with that mindset. But my question to you is, was there any part of the business that you did not know that you could not learn? Because someone sitting here, there are two types of people, right? And I get this from Rocket Fuel. You have your visionaries that are more creatives, then you have your integrators. My hunch is you're one of those rare people who genuinely can do both. Your mind works very operationally, and it also does work more creatively too, right? But for the brand owner watching this who's saying, ah man, like I'm really good at ideas, but I suck at ops and finance, like do they have to learn every single aspect of the business? And what would you say to them if they're like, there are some things that just are not, don't come natural to me, and I just struggle with them a lot? What would you say to that type of person?
So first of all, yes, you would say that I'm laissez-faire because you Revenue Labs runs retention for me, and you guys, I trust you guys so much. And so your whole team all over the world is amazing. Every one of them, there's no red flags. So I turn off and I become laissez-faire with you guys. But if you remember when we first started, I wasn't laissez-faire. I wanted to see I wanted to see you deliver on the changes that you said you were going to do. And that's how I am with the marketing team that we have right now, which is, I think, one of the best marketing teams in the business. but I was a nightmare for them when they began because there were a lot of hiccups. And that's again another episode, the hiccups of marketing, but and how to avoid them and how to maximize marketing. But you don't have to be an expert in the sense that you're sitting there and you're compiling, the flows on Klaviyo and the emails and the text messages and setting up tracking but you have to understand the basics of how it works and you have to go through it. Meaning, I'm not saying you have to be the best bike rider in the world, but if you know how to ride a bike, then you can watch the professionals when they're in Paris or they're in France and the big race is happening. You can appreciate it more because you understand what it's like to ride up a hill and how difficult it is. And these guys are doing it at 40 miles an hour. So it's just important enough to get the basics so that you can understand if something is working or it's not working just beyond the data. Meaning, don't just look at the data, like how are they doing that? Why are they making those decisions? That's really important because then you can apply it to other areas of your business. So I'm not an expert in everything. There's certain areas that, like, running meta ads is just something I'm never going to do. I know you have a client that did it before he hired a marketing agency. And I was like, how could you run ads on Meta and then give up those ads to some company and pay them so much money when you can do it yourself? And he was like, so I have other things to do. And he's like,
So you didn't start off with meta ads. You never ran ads yourself. So was that something you kind of hired out the gate?
I did not. My attention to detail on Meta was there, meaning I would look at sales on an hourly basis. I would try to understand why certain things were working and why certain things weren't working. I got more involved in the creating the ads for Meta. That's where my mind goes. So that's my expertise, is building the ads, the content, the scripts, and hiring the people that are going to be, or getting the customers that are so great at explaining why they love the brand and getting them on film and incentivizing them to be on film so it's authentic. Those are the ways that I would get involved. I wouldn't actually place the ads and manage the budgeting, but I
So you supported the creative process, but then when it comes to the button pushing, you immediately let a freelancer or agency. What was it? A freelancer or an agency in the beginning? Take me right back to, when you were kind of getting up and running. Was it a freelancer? Was it an agency? You said you were helping with a script writing. One thing I've noticed as well, for any brand owner listening here, I think one thing that Dan does still till today is support anyone he works with a whole bunch of content. Dan, would you agree? I think right now, like, one of your full-time jobs as a brand owner is just supporting with as much content as you can humanly attain.
My job as the owner of the company is to make sure that any of the teams that I bring on board, whether full-time or freelance, we don't have full-time, but we have a lot of freelancers they're like full-time. I mean, we're their number one source of income. We're important to them. We've become really important to them as we've gotten bigger, and they've earned all their success and all the money they're making. Those freelancers have to not have bumps in the road that I can prevent. Meaning, they're going to have their own bumps in the road, that they're going to be like Facebook going down, or the economy, or something happening in politics, or whatever it is. But my job is to make sure that as many bumps that they would typically have are just smoothed out. And to give you an example, that could just be making sure the inventory doesn't run out. You could have the best marketing and retention team in the world, but if there's no inventory to sell because you didn't buy properly or you ran out of money, then they have to stop their ads. And then that means they stop making money, right? Because they're freelance. So then they're going to start focusing on other areas of their businesses, other clients. And I don't want that. I want them focused on me. I want them to see me as their biggest source of income. So I work tirelessly 24/7, making sure that we don't run out of inventory. The best sellers are always in stock. And that when they are running an ad, it's like the best content possible that they could be getting. And it's with either athletes or customers or influencers that are a great fit for the brand and are really relatable. And so I always say to them, when we have our meetings, it's not like me interviewing them, like, what have you done for me? It's like, what can I do for you this week before our next call that will make the next call go even better than today? That's what I ask every company that I work with. Just how can I help you do your job better? As long as I'm feeding them, then they're going to make sure I'm eating. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that is really what differentiates a top 1% founder. It is the sense of duty to make sure that your any, advertising partner, ad partner, whoever it is that you work with has everything that they need in order to be successful, giving them that and then getting out of their way so that they can go and solve the problem and then keeping them accountable, of course, that they are actually meeting those deadlines and, not deadlines only, but like the results, all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, appreciate you sharing that. And you got to a point where you realized that retention is important, right? And you started to try it. Before you got to a solution of retention being one of the stronger channels in the business, right before that, what action did you take to try to get it to work?
So again, I was not an expert in retention, and I just thought having an email list was really all that was necessary. And I didn't understand what retention really was because retention today is not what it was 5 years ago. It's completely a different ballgame now. It's so complex. I mean, I didn't know what a flow was. Flows are the most important aspects of my business. That's where, and you can explain it better than I can, but you go to Klavi and you just think, oh, it's just sending out an email and making sure the emails are good, and that is so wrong. So I'll turn it around on you because I think before you can even come up with a solution, you have to understand what you're talking about. Can you explain what makes Klaviyo so complex? Why it's not just about sending out emails, because that's not at all what it is.
Yeah, 100%. I think you explained it very well where you said Klaviyo is like a private jet where you, you have all of these buttons, right? And you don't really know what they do. And each one does a different thing. But then once you harness it, you can actually fly and go to any country you want, right? So I think in a similar vein, a lot of brands, they think that email is just sending out emails, but they don't really account for all of the other things when it comes to, for example, your acquisition cost goes down, the fact that you can spend more on ads with everything that you end up collecting from your email channel. And then there was another thing that you actually mentioned to me the other day where you said, hey, Sam, I'm getting way less customer support tickets than I ever have in my entire life, right?
That's where the intricacies of the flows and even the content of your emails come in. So think about like what are the top questions that people ask you for your brand. You sort of know in the first month what the questions are because just like I said to you, I gave you the driveway example of 100 people buying your product, 95 of them like loving your product and being completely happy with it. It's the same thing with retention. Those 5 complaints that you're going to get are probably the same 5 complaints you're going to get for the next 100. Or there's going to be a lot of overlap to say the least. So when you start to understand the questions that people are having, then you can use that information to update the way you're marketing your brand in ads, in the way that you present on your website, but also in the emails and the text messages that you send. So if I know that someone's saying, well, why do you offer CastleFit as an annual subscription and there's 2 prices? And one is just for a year and one is for a renewal. Why are there 2 different prices if it's the same program? And so an email explaining to everybody that, listen, it's the same exact program, but we're giving you a discount, which is pretty standard for yeah, for it to be renewing automatically every year. You could still cancel, but we want people that are going to be part of the subscription. We want to know that you're going to be coming back so we can continue to invest in the program and put more money into it. That could be answered in one email or in a flow, meaning a flow is when a customer buys your product, then it initiates a flow. It's called, and we'll call it the post-purchase flow. So they buy the product. What email do they get the day that they buy that product? Thank you for your order. Here's some commonly asked questions. This is what to expect. Then there's another flow for when they receive their product. That is the receipt flow or the reception flow or the delivery flow, whatever you want to call it. Now it showed up at their door. There better be an email that coincides with you getting that customer getting that product. So now that product is at your door. By the way, here's how you learn to use that product. We offer free classes on YouTube or paid subscription on our platform, and you can decide which one you want. By the way, don't take it on a plane. TSA will confiscate it. By the way, don't put it in your washer dryer. It'll ruin it. Like these are ways to cut those questions off before they even come. So by the time they even have their product, they've already gotten 2 emails from you just from the flow, 2 flows. And then there's a third flow that comes 14 days later, which is, how is your first 2 weeks? By the way, if you don't return it today, you're going to be keeping it because today is the last day of the window return. And we would love a review. If you can give us a review, we'll give you $40 off your next purchase. That's an example of our first 3 flows. I just gave you an example. We have 2 dozen flows for all different scenarios that your team has set up for us. But to think that it's just an email to your email list is just not how Klaviyo works. It's so much more intricate than that.
Of course. No, I appreciate you sharing that, Dan. In my experience, right, I think there are 3 pillars to email outside of just, sending out email, SMS, and getting revenue. Obviously, revenue is the North Star, but there are 3 things that I think a lot of people overlook. And this is where the real gold is, in my opinion, in email. The first thing is onboarding, right? There is nothing better than a customer receiving your product and using it. Because when they use it, number one, if your product is obviously good, they'll benefit from it. They'll probably tell a friend about it. They would, share it with somebody. And the more that they use it, the more they're likely to repurchase from you or buy something else of yours. So the first thing is product onboarding, making sure you get products into your customer's hand and they understand exactly how to use it. An example that I was actually inspired by was when I bought my Dyson Hoover. The way that they showed me how to use the product made me want to literally go and hoover my house immediately. And I'm not really the biggest tech appliance guy, but it was very exciting. And that's what actually inspired me in how to create a really good onboarding process. Because the way it made me feel after my purchase and how they tried to get me to use the product, it was a masterclass in getting someone to, get started with it, right? The second pillar is buyer's remorse. And this is a testament, obviously, you have an excellent product in CastleFlex. You want to reduce your return rate, right? Because if I just look at a revenue number, but then I don't account for my returns, that's not really a true reflection of how good or powerful my business is. So the second thing you want to do is you want to reduce buyer's remorse. And from what I've learned, the best way to do that is the 3 pillars of belief. The first pillar is social proof. So we are social beings. I love the little thumbs up that's coming. So we are social beings, right? We believe what we see the crowd to believe to some way, shape, or form. So if I see loads of testimonials as I've placed my order, in between me actually placing the order and receiving it, what you want to do is you want to reduce buyer's remorse. In your case, Dan, you have a product with a kind of high average order value of like around $200 plus, right? If somebody uses their credit card and they purchase, you don't want them to think, damn, did I really need that? And I read a stat, it's like 7 out of 10 buyers experience buyer's remorse. You want to use your retention channel to mitigate buyer's remorse as soon as you humanly can by showcasing in that time that they've ordered it and the time that they receive it, why they should be so excited. And the way you do that, like I said, 3 pillars of belief: social proof, so sharing customer testimonials; status proof, so sharing like different publications that you might have been in, how many customers you've served, have you served any celebrity customers? So then you're building that, oh, this might actually work for me. And finally, demonstrative proof, so showing them video on someone using the product so they can future pace themselves using it when it arrives in their home, right? So when you couple mitigating buyer's remorse with product onboarding, you now have a seamless transition from them placing the order, getting excited, receiving the product, using it. This is what causes a bridge to viscerality, which then helps word of mouth, low customer support tickets, low refund and return rates and all that good stuff, right? And the last thing, and I think this is probably one of the most important things, is the use of zero-party data. And there's a book that I'm reading. It was actually recommended to me by Adam Robinson, the founder of retention.com. I saw one of his videos. It's called 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And what it talks about is, you look in the past how a lot of brands, and I think a lot of e-commerce brands, they operate this way too. They go from zero to idea, launch, and then they haven't done any customer research, right? Well, we like to use zero-party data, and this is for small brands all the way to large brands, is you want to use key parts of the customer experience to ask your customers questions, right? So even from the pop-up, What with the Castle Flex, if you go on the pop up, the first thing that you see is, hey, what brings you to Castle Flex? And you have four options. I have chronic pain. I want to improve my flexibility. I have plantar fasciitis, and the fourth one evades me. But it gives you four options essentially. And when you have that data, you understand why your customers are here. So you can amend language in your CRO pages. You can make ad creatives based on that. And you as a founder start to understand where the main problem is that you need to lean into and solve with your wording, your marketing, and all that kind of stuff, right? Then let's say in another flow, your abandoned cart flow, if someone didn't buy at the end, saying, hey, what stopped your purchase today? Maybe the product was too expensive. Maybe you didn't believe that the product would work. Maybe you didn't like any of the colors or any of the SKUs or any of the options that you had with customizing the product, right? So this is all really valuable information I think nobody asks. And the more information you have on your customer, the more informed decisions you can make to then pivot into the right direction. Anything to add on those three?
Yeah, I love that. Just to give you an example. So remember we did a poll a few weeks ago where we asked your retention team, which is our retention team, to send out a poll just to the customers to find out, like, how old are they? Why are they buying the product? Like, do they love the product? How often do they use the product? Those, what could be better about the product or the experience? And that poll was so valuable to us that we had about, I think, 500 responses. And then that poll, the app we used put that poll into little charts and graphs, so it was nice and visual for me. And what we learned was that more than half of our customers are over the age of 50. And so that immediately, how else would I know that? No, Meta doesn't tell you, or Google, they don't tell you that information. What they do is you can advertise to certain groups, and then you see based on what does well, how things go, right? And then you can say, oh, based on the ads that we're doing to age 50 plus, those are doing better. It's not necessarily always to say that your customers are all over the age of 50s. It could be they're buying it for somebody that's their child or for their grandchild. You just don't know. So what the poll told me was, wait a second, we are like so pro athlete centric, meaning our socials are all about the famous athletes that use our device. We don't pay them. That's something that we take a lot of pride in. That's another episode. We don't do gifting. And my understanding was that cool athletes are using it, then wouldn't everybody else want to give it a shot, right? There's your social proof. But that actually is not true. What we found was a lot of people were intimidated by these athletes that look like Greek gods, that all they do all day is work on their bodies and their mobility, and they get paid millions of dollars for it. And that's not them. And they don't feel like that post or that image on our website is reflective of the issue that they're dealing with that is allowing them to even consider this as a purchase, because it is expensive. We are the most expensive in our category. There's no close second. Where most stretching devices or mobility devices are $19, we're approaching 260. So we're just in a different league altogether when it comes to price and quality and efficacy, but you're paying for it, and it's an investment. So I wasn't surprised that we had so many customers that were over the age of 50. I was just surprised that they were just not impressed with our photo shoots and our marketing and our fancy athletes. And they just really wanted to see someone like themselves using it and talking about how it's helped them.
Amazing. I really like how you mentioned that the hypothesis of an athlete would make someone else want to purchase, but in the end they couldn't actually resonate with the athlete. So that was a bit of a limiting belief actually to them. And then the way I think we've flipped it in the funnel is that athletes kind of co-sign that this thing is legit, but then there are normal people like them who are at the forefront of the marketing. So that way you still are having athletes as credibility, but then you're not leading with them, because then there's a disconnect, there's an incongruence there, right? So that's what I guess the teachings were. Would you agree?
Yeah, if you're working on, if your brand is a trend, then the athletes are the way to go and make a quick buck. If that's your way of thinking, then I totally understand that. And there's a lot of celebrity type brands that feed into that. We're just not that type of a brand. Our brand is for people that really want to improve their health, something's causing them pain that's affecting other areas of their life. Chronic pain is any pain for more than 6 months. So it's definitely a lot of our customers have chronic pain, and that's what gets them to want to buy it because they're already spending so much money every month on trying to treat their pain. So for them, our price tag they don't even look at our price because they're like, if it works, then amazing, it's going to save me hundreds a month, and if it doesn't, I'll return it. It's a great segue into sometimes when you start a brand, you start a business, you have this vision in your mind of it's gonna go this way, and then you start the brand and all of a sudden it takes a sharp right turn, or it does a U-turn and then comes back around, or it flies, or it goes underground. You just don't know until you start it. And so when I started the brand, my thought was, oh, we're going to have like the fancy yoga Pilates crowd because this is Pilates in a bottle, and Pilates is expensive, and now they don't need to go to Pilates as much. Still the best, in my opinion, best way to take care of your body is Pilates, but not everyone can afford it, and it is time consuming, and it is difficult to put in those positions in front of strangers. But they didn't even consider it because they were spending so much money already on their injuries that they were like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. And the people that I thought I was going to get, they're more interested in proof of concept, and is this famous person using it, and is my athlete, my local team using it. And so it's a different person. Our person is going out of a need, and those other people, they'll find us if they really need to. If they're in pain and they've got an issue that they can't fix, they'll eventually find us. But it's just not what ended up happening for our brand. We thought we were going to have one customer, maybe the Lululemon customer, and we got a completely different customer. Doesn't mean we're not going to get that customer eventually. I think we will in the next 2 or 3 years. Right now, brisk walking is the thing, but new studies are showing, especially in Europe, that stretching, especially active stretching, is way more effective than brisk walking in many ways, but lowering blood pressure being number one. And these clinical studies are proving that stretching is just a better way of doing things for a lot of people, all ages, from 8 to 80. And not everyone can do yoga and lean forward and put that kind of strain on their back. Not everybody can go walking around the neighborhood. Some people have neighborhoods that aren't safe. They just want to have the control to do it on the road, on a road trip, or in their office, or in their home. And they don't want someone dictating to them when they should do something. They don't want to go to a class, or they don't want to miss the class and then still have to pay for it. So eventually they will come around, but we don't have that customer yet. That's the next phase for us.
Brilliant. Appreciate you sharing that. So my understanding is, as you're building the brand, you should be stubborn in the macro, as in I'm going to be successful. But then I think you should be very flexible and kind of detached in the micro, in that sometimes it can take a different turn or a different way than what you initially expected. And I think you need to be in tune with that and not be stubborn in the micro, because that could really hamper you to not take those lessons, right? And I think a good place to round up here, Dan, is when you got retention fixed and dialed in, what was the outcome for your business in general? For anyone watching as a brand owner who's on the fence thinking about, like maybe retention, is it the right time? Is it the right moment? Or, in general, just someone literally thinking about retention, what was the outcome for you that you've seen?
So several real amazing benefits. One is we're no longer on the spam list because people actually enjoy our emails. The content is good. Number two, it's reduced our customer service needs, meaning I was planning on hiring a customer service team, and I don't need to do that right now because the flows and the emails and the texts are taking care of most of it for me. And number three is we were at anywhere from 12 to 18% of our revenue coming from retention, and now we're at 35%, I think. So it's pretty incredible what the numbers have done. I think that's the first time I've said the number on this podcast, but that's a huge growth of retention revenue. And then there's probably a million other benefits that we can talk about, but those are, I would say, the top 3 or 4 that come to mind.
Amazing. No, I appreciate you sharing that, Dan. And to finish off, any brand owner, regardless of where they are in their journey, right? I'm sure they want that one bleeding piece of advice from a top 1% Shopify brand owner and yourself. And, a lot of people don't know about Dan, but not only is Dan a top 1% Shopify store owner, but Dan has done numerous other incredible things. Before even founding the brand, Dan has been, Martha Stewart's ex-managing director, and so many other different incredible things. You've met the who's who, you're friends with the who's who, and you've accomplished so many different things. So for someone like yourself, Dan, you know, if you could impart a level of advice on an up and coming brand owner, no matter where they are on the journey, 0 to 100 to 2 mil, and beyond, what would you put that advice in a bottle and give it to them? What would that be as a parting note from Dan?
That's a good question. I would say number one is implement the 80/20 rule. So if you're like me and you're 100% rational and pragmatic, you need to find that 20% fun, creative, maybe a little outside the box and crazy, so that you can make your business and products and the way you convey the brand to people, eye catching and unique. And I would say one more other piece of advice I would say is don't ever let anyone compare you to other companies. So I don't really care if I'm on top 1% or not. That's not what is, I'm not going to retire off of being the top 1%. That can change at any given day or any given week. I'm one mistake away from being in the bottom 1%. So don't get caught up on all that stuff. And I see a lot of founders, especially on LinkedIn, they're always speaking. Like I invested in a brand that I invested in the VC that invested in Allbirds. And I invested in three or four different companies. This was 10, 15 years ago. And all of those companies were unicorns, right? They were all going to be unicorns. They were all had those initial enormous amounts of success, way more than my brand. And four out of five are now out of business. And the fifth one is, well, three out of five are out of business. Fourth one is publicly traded now and is a big success. That's Sweet Green. And then another one is just they can't get an exit. They can't. They've got good revenue, but they just no one's interested in their property, and they want to capitalize, and no one's interested. So all my investments were basically failures. And I think the reason I made those investments is because I didn't believe in myself. I believed that these founders were more likely to do something with my money than I could. So I think two things. One is I invested too early. That wasn't money I should have ever been investing. I should have been saving that money or doing other things with it. I could have given it away to charity. It would have been it would have made me feel a lot better. And number two is believe in yourself. Don't, if you're going to go through life thinking that somebody else is going to be your ticket because you've seen famous investors living off the lavishes of investments that they've made, those are so rare. People don't leave a casino and brag about how much they lost. They talk about how much they won. But you're seeing one or two people. Those are the people that are on that podcast. The thousands that left that casino that went home and told their partner, like, I just blew 2 weeks worth of wages and I don't know how we're going to make the rent. Those are the ones that you don't see. And it's the same concept when you're building a brand. Don't get caught up in all the hype and all the speaking engagements and so on and so forth. I saw Allbirds as an amazing brand. I thought, oh, maybe I made a mistake there by not investing. But there was something that rubbed me the wrong way. The two CEOs they were two CEOs, so they were co-CEOs. That's always going to be a problem because who's really in charge? And number two is they were always doing speaking engagements at Bloomberg or Morgan Stanley or whoever, and they raised hundreds of millions of dollars. How could you do so many speaking engagements and still run the business? I can't even get my head above the water on what I'm dealing with. How could I go to Chicago on Wednesday for a 2-day summit and speak and give out all this information to people that I don't even know, that can care less about me or my company, and then get back to work and not have to make up all that time that I just lost? And so that would rub me the wrong way, and now they're in trouble. But it, and you can also say that for Peloton. How could they invest so much money? Stop getting caught up in being famous and caring about what other people think. Focus on building a business that is profitable, that is solving a problem, and that is unique. And the rest will just come with time. We haven't had any big breaks. We haven't been mentioned on Joe Rogan. We haven't had any of those tipping point moments that Malcolm Gladwell talks about. We haven't had that yet. Yet we're still so successful. And so I don't need any, I'm a perfect example of you don't need to have famous celebrities and famous, I might know a lot of them because I either ran their businesses or helped them in certain deals before I started this company. That was what I did. But they, that's not going to make this brand successful, knowing those people or mentioning those people. It's going to be profits, cash flow, patents, quality control, retention, marketing, low CAC, all the things that we talked about today. That's what's going to make you successful. We didn't talk about any of that Hollywood stuff today, and that was on purpose.
Brilliant, Dan. I really appreciate you sharing that. And one thing that really caught on to what I said, what you said is, and I think this is a good deduction. Correct me if I'm wrong, but 80% of focus goes into building the business, i.e., doing the traditional stuff, making sure you're being safe and secure and doing things the right way. And 20% goes into building a brand, doing outlandish, wacky, crazy things that will take you to that next level without being just purely a scientist and being a bit more of an artist with it. And that is what gets you quantum leaps. And then the 80% is what helps you stabilize the ship. Would you say that's a fair deduction?
100%. It's 100% a fair deduction. And even if it's 85-15, there has to be, it doesn't have to be 80-20. It depends on you as a person and your business. But it's like when you own a fashion brand and you come out with 100 items of clothing, the designer is always told to do 20% press pieces. They're called press pieces. The pieces that are the runway that you see on the runway, you're like, no one ever wears that stuff. Why are they doing that? Well, let me give you a little inside information. That the reason they're doing that is because you're talking about them. You're actually talking about that crazy stuff that's on that runway and that you see in Vogue and you see on TV and you see the celebrity actually wearing. That 20% does not make their business successful, but it helps the other 80% by raising the bar when it comes to creativity and PR and marketing. And so you're just sort of applying that same concept to how you run the business. For me, that 20% is divided into very different areas, but it could be taking a risk on a new influencer. It could be a new invention that no one thinks can be successful. There's so many. It could be launching, and we just launched in the UK. That was a little crazy. Why would a company not even 3 years young take that step? It's a big investment. So that's where my 20 comes in, and that's for me. That's the formula that's worked.
Amazing. Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to get on my Castle Flex right over there and have a little stretch session as well. But thank you so much for hopping on, sharing your incredible wisdom. And hopefully, even if we can help one brand owner with this get aligned in the right direction, I think it's a job very well done.
I wish I had this. I wish I had this podcast before I started my company. It would have saved me a lot of time and money. So hopefully someone's seeing this.
Amazing. Amazing. Awesome, Dan. Well, thank you so much. And we'll catch up very soon, my friends.